Hi, and welcome back for our next section. This is like a pre-introduction to this section. I just want to go over a couple things before I really jump into the contract. And that's what we're going to be going over is the contract. And this will be the longest section that we have. It's going to take us almost an hour to get through this one. Actually, probably a little over an hour. We're going to go over the contract pretty much section by section. But I just want to go ahead and emphasize right now that your contract could be different from the one that is displayed in this presentation. It could be different than the one that we're going over. So the official contract that will govern your course will be the contract that you sign. So if there's any conflict between what I go over in the presentation and the contract you sign, your contract that you sign is what we will go by. There are a few things that could change. There could be some fee changes. If the fee that I go over in the recording is different than the one in your contract, the one that's in your contract is the one that we will go by. Same thing with due dates or anything like that. So just make sure that you sit down and you read your contract as well as listen to this. 99% of what we're about to go over will equate to what your contract says. So this is just in case we make a few tweaks or changes somewhere along the way. Okay, with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the contract. Hello. Welcome back. This is Tom Camplain with Georgia Institute of EMS's EMT Online Class Orientation. And in this segment, I want to go over the student contract. And I want to just go ahead and give you a warning that this section could be probably the longest section that you'll go through. It can be a little bit because we do have a lot to go over. So I'm going to pull up the student contract here, and we're just going to go over this line by line before you come in. Now, you will be getting a copy of this in your via email. You will be required to sign it, which is mandatory. You will be expected to follow the guidelines established in the contract. So those are some of the things that I just want to put out there for you right now. You can use this. Now, the thing is, there is a chance that there could be some changes in the actual contract that you get, and you will be required to adhere to those requirements. So changes will be in writing, though. And what you're expected to follow is not what we go over pretty much in this video. This video is an overview only, but what you are expected to adhere to is the contract that you will be signing. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and let's pull up this contract. And this is what it looks like. Here you will have your name will go here, and the date that you go over it will go there. Now, as you're going over it, you will need to place your initials next to each item here, like attendance, and that's going to indicate that you have read this section. Now, I'm going to go over this section with you as well. Now, when you come to your in-person orientation, that first night you're coming to the campus, if you have any questions, please bring them up at that time. You can email us at info@GAIEMS, but a lot of times I feel like that it's best to talk in person about it. But if you want to, feel free to send us an email with any questions that come up as we're going through this as well. So here, let's look at attendance. Students are expected to be present for all lab sessions and complete 100% of all competencies. Now, if you see in some places in this contract, I have it highlighted. I have them bolded, and you'll see some things that are red that I really want you to understand and know. I don't want anything to be a surprise to you, especially when it comes to fees or anything. So 100% of all competencies must be met. You can't skip a competency and it be okay. You have to meet all competencies regardless of what your grade is, okay? All missed lab activities must be made up, and a cost is $75 per makeup lab, okay? That is $75 per makeup lab there. Now, we try not to charge you this, and if we can put you in another lab section that has an open slot with another class, then that is free. Now, we don't put that in here because you need to go into it that if I miss a lab, it's going to cost me $75, and there's no guarantee that I can get it for free. Now, there are some situations where we do offer excused missed labs. Verified jury duty. Now go ahead and understand this, that most of the time there's no jury duty from 6 to 10 at night. Okay, so we would need verification. Verified military orders that you did not volunteer for. Now, I was in the National Guard and in the reserves in the military for 12 years, and I know that there's a difference between a forced deployment, something you had no control over, and deployments that you can volunteer for. Okay, the volunteer deployments is a little different. Now, we usually will do some leadway and we'll help you the best we can with that, but it could end up costing you, but we do try not to, okay? Death in the immediate family. Now, I'm not saying that my great-great-aunt, uncle, cousin passed away. That's, unfortunately, at your workplace of work, you probably won't get a day off for that. But, like I said, we will do our best to get you into a free alternative there. So the makeup labs, just go ahead and expect it could be $75, okay? Makeup labs will be scheduled with the lab scheduler and will be done at the Covington location. To receive credit for a lab, students must be present and actively participate in the lab. So if you show up to lab and you're sitting there doing Twitter and Facebook the whole lab and not participating, we may pull you to the side and say, you're not getting credit for this and you're going to have to redo it. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to pay for it. Also, leaving early will result in the student not receiving credit for attendance. The lab is 4 hours. You need to be there for it. Failure to complete the lab will result in the student having to make up the lab and pay a missed lab fee. Additionally, arriving late or leaving early could result in deduction in the student's overall lab grade. Students are not permitted to leave early because the instructor has presented the skills scheduled to be demonstrated in the scheduled lab. Students are expected to stay until the end of lab and practice skills until the end of class. This can include students participating in other skills learned in previous labs. If you have extra time to do things, you need to utilize that time. I'm pretty sure there's things that you don't understand. There's things you need clarification on. You need to utilize that lab time for that. That is what it's there for. The online course room. Students are required to participate in the online course room on a weekly basis. Students who are absent from the course room for greater than a week risk being dropped from the course. Missing 2 weeks or more from the online course room will result from the student being dropped from the course without a refund. Okay, we are not giving refunds here just because you decided to drop. Once you enter into this contract and you say you want to be an EMT student, there are very, very few instances where you get a refund. Okay, just want you knowing that going forward. Students that are going to be absent for an extended amount of time must contact the instructor in writing via email to advise of the absence. Now, this course is set up such so that if you need to take time off, you can. We just need you to communicate with us and let us know, hey, I'm going to be absent from the course room for a little while. And people will say, well, I had an emergency. Well, it only takes a few seconds for you to shoot us an email or a text or something saying, hey, I've got an emergency. I may be absent from the course room for a couple weeks. Physical aspects. As an EMT, you're going to be exposed to many physically demanding tasks on a regular basis. As an EMT student, you will be subjected to many of the same tasks in a simulated environment. For example, all EMT students will be expected to lift and carry patients of various sizes on a stretcher. To prepare for these tasks, students are encouraged to participate in physical training activities that can increase strength and endurance. Students must be able to participate in all activities and meet all competencies as a requirement to complete the course. Any physical limitations acquired during the program, such as broken limbs, pregnancy, etc., may. Now, I put may there underlined and bold because it may. It does not mean it's going to cause the student be unable to satisfactorily fulfill the course requirements, prohibiting them from continuing in the program. Doesn't mean it is, but it could. So let's say if you're pregnant and if you can't do anything, all right, then you may not be able to complete the program. But if you are pregnant and you're able to do things with modification, now we will do things to modify the environment so that we will work with you and around you. Let's say if you broke your leg, well, we may do things to help you with that. We may postpone things for you. We'll work with you individually to get it done. But you need to work with us on that as well. But if by the end of the program you're not able to get it done, well, then that could be a problem. Qualifications. To participate in the program, students must be at least 18 years of age. Now, if you are under 18, there are some students that are under 18, but that is with special approval from the school, okay? And we do work with them, but by the time they finish the program, they will be over 18 at that time. Have a high school diploma or GED or special approval from us, which I should have put that up here, special approval from us. And you must provide a valid ID, which is either a birth certificate or official driver's license or ID. We prefer the driver's license because it has your picture on it, and the state office prefers your driver's license as well. So if you have a license or ID, that's what we want. Now, students, you must also provide a copy of the following at orientation unless other arrangements have been made. An official document showing your date of birth, which is your driver's license, or a copy of your high school diploma or a transcript showing graduation. This is a state requirement. This is not a school requirement, okay? The state of Georgia requires that you are a high school graduate. Now, we have all the time people say, well, I have a bachelor's degree or I have a master's degree. Well, what the state office says is that the state office has told us many times, we don't require a bachelor's degree and we don't require a master's degree. We require a high school diploma and we need proof of it. Now, I understand that many of you will say, well, if you have a bachelor's degree, well, then you have to have a high school diploma. Well, that's not always true. We've had examples of people from other states and from other countries who do not have a high school diploma, but they do have those things. However, if you need that, every jurisdiction in the United States of America is required to keep high school transcripts. All you have to do is contact the Board of Education where you went to school, and they will provide a document stating that you have graduated high school. It has never been a problem anywhere, okay? Students have been convicted of a felony or multiple misdemeanors will need to contact the Georgia Department of Public Health Region 3 Office of EMS and Trauma to determine eligibility for licensure as an EMT, and the National Registry of EMTs to determine eligibility for National Registry testing. For contact information, go to www.ems.ga.gov. So if this qualifies for you, you need to contact us and let us know. And we need to get in touch with the right people so that we can make sure that you're going to be okay to get licensed. Now, the class schedule, you will be required to attend labs as outlined in the schedule. In the schedule, you probably have seen it online. And we will be providing you a copy of that schedule when you come to class or come to your in-person orientation. If for some reason it is determined by the instructional staff that more sessions are needed for an individual to master skill, then that student will be required to complete the additional lab sessions. That is a requirement. You have to meet 100% of all the requirements, and you have to be able to do 100% of the skills. If the lab sessions that we're doing are not sufficient enough for you, then you're going to have to do more. However, we've never had a problem with this, ever. But it needs to be in here because the day will come where someone's just not getting it and they'll need extra practice. And
That's why it's in there. The lab schedule is subject to change. If change occurs, you will receive notification via email and or phone. Notification will be provided as far in advance as possible if a cancellation occurs. Please note that for the most part, if the local school system is closed, which is Newton County, the Newton County school system is closed, then Georgia Institute of EMS will be closed. Our official closure announcements will be found online at georgiaemt.com or our school's official Facebook page. We also have agreements with the local news media, and we do post there as well. But the first place will be on our website and our Facebook pages. And this is mainly in response to bad weather. Okay, if we're closing for weather, but we will have to reschedule. So if we're closed for weather, those labs will have to be rescheduled. Any schedule changes will be announced in advance. Based on course materials to be covered, additional class days or additional class hours may be periodically scheduled. Prior notice will be given and arrangements must be made for attendance. Absence from any class session must be made up. Testing and homework. Students can expect multiple announced quizzes and exams during the program. Pop quizzes, which are unannounced, and numerous practical exams will also be administered. Missed quizzes and exams will result in the students earning a 0 unless prior approval has been obtained by the instructor. Quizzes cannot be made up even if the student arrives late for class. Some quizzes and exams have set time limits. If a student arrives late and a quiz or test is in progress, the student will have the remainder of that allotted time from when the test originally started to complete the exam. The only exception to this policy is if prior arrangements have been made and approved by the instructor. So what we're saying is if we're going to have a test start at 6 o'clock and you show up at 6:15 and we've allotted 30 minutes for that exam, well then that means you have 15 minutes to complete the exam. So make sure you're on time. Practical exams missed due to an absence will be made up outside of class time with an appointment. It is the responsibility, look, I've highlighted, responsibility of the student to acquire and complete all makeup work. Makeup exams will be completed outside of class. Makeup exams that require an instructor will be charged a $75 fee. Now, this is not typically a written exam because those exams we do not charge. This would be a practical type exam that would cost you, okay? Makeup labs will be completed outside of regular class hours. Makeup labs should be made up as soon as possible due to certain labs having to be completed before clinicals can be scheduled. Makeup labs will require an instructor and a $75 fee is required. Once again, and I've said this before, if we can get you into a free option, we will. But if we can't, you will have to pay the fee for a private lab session. All assignments are due at the beginning of class on the due date unless specified otherwise by the lead instructor. Assignments turned in late will receive a 0 as a grade unless prior arrangements have been made with the instructor. So what is this saying? And I've said this before, communication. Communicate with us. If you're having difficulty, if you're going to be late or something, communicate with us so that the instructor can make arrangements and you'll be okay. Students, and now look, I did this in yellow, I did it in bold, and I did it in red, and I underlined it. So that must mean I mean this, okay? This is something important. Students must maintain an average of an 80% and pass all practical skills exams. Grades will not be curved. Okay, so you must have an overall 80% to pass this course. If you do not have the 80%, then you will not pass the course. So you need to work to get that. Now, remember, I've told you before that if you failed an exam and you come in and you do the remediation, we will allow you to retake that exam so you can get that 80%. So all hope is not lost if you do poorly on an exam. State and national certification. The licensure process consists of a written and practical exam administered by the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians and reciprocity from the Georgia Department of Public Health after successfully passing the National Registry written and practical exams. To be eligible for this exam, the student must successfully complete all requirements stated in this contract, the course syllabus, State Office of EMS rules and procedures, and National Registry policy and procedures. Licensing and National Registry fees are not a part of tuition and are the responsibility of the student. So that means you have to pay your National Registry fees. Okay? After course completion and clearance from the Georgia Institute of EMS and the State Office of EMS, students will be required to set up an account with the National Registry of EMTs to schedule their cognitive exam. The Cognitive and Psychomotor Skills exam is administered by the National Registry and is not included in your course tuition. Any issues associated with signing up for the cognitive exam will have to be handled by contacting the National Registry directly. Their web address is www.nremt.org. Please note, students are not immediately eligible to take the cognitive exam at the end of the course. Once the course ends, there is a verification process that takes place that is required by the State Office of EMS. This process of verification is in place to assure that students have met 100% of the course requirements. This process can take 3 to 4 weeks to complete. Georgia Institute of EMS strives to complete this process as soon as possible after course completion date. However, Georgia Institute of EMS cannot control how quickly the state completes the verification process. Georgia Institute of EMS will provide students with course completion updates as they are announced. Now, what that means is when you complete the program, that means we have to submit paperwork to the State Office of EMS that shows that you completed everything. Also, the State Office of EMS has the right to go into your online course room and ensure that you did all the work. They have a right to inspect all of your coursework to make sure that you did it. Okay? That can take time. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that generally this only takes a week. But sometimes, like here over the holidays, it's taking a little longer because they're on vacation, their office is closed, and it can take longer. So generally, they say 3 to 4 weeks. I'm going to tell you in practicality, it's 1 to 2 weeks. A lot of times it's only 1 week. So just keep that in mind. Do not think that, hey, I'm starting this program and I got to take the exam the day after the course ends. If that's the case, it's not going to happen. And it doesn't matter what school you go to, it's not going to happen. This is not a Georgia Institute of EMS policy. This is just the way it works through the state. Safety and hygiene. Safety is of the utmost importance in this class and while working as an EMT. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, when you're working as an EMT, the first thing is scene safety. So safety is very important. Any unsafe act should be brought to the attention of an instructor immediately. All right, so if you see anything, and it's not just unsafe act, anything that's unsafe, you need to let us know so that we can address it immediately. We do not want anyone becoming injured at all in this program. Because of the close contact among students and the frequent use of the same equipment, the best personal hygiene is necessary. Gloves will be available during all student contact exercises. Additionally, students must refrain from wearing perfumes and colognes that have strong and/or overpowering fragrances. Students are expected to be clean and free of offensive body odors. Students who are not clean or have offensive body odors will be required to correct the situation. Time missed by correcting deficiencies will be counted as a tardy and/or absence. If an absence is necessary, the missed time will have to be made up. Any lab fees paid will be lost, and an additional lab fee of $75 must be paid to attend the makeup lab. Clinical. Now, I want to go ahead and say that we are briefly addressing a few clinical issues here just to prime you. You will address clinical stuff in more in-depth detail during your clinical orientation. However, during the course, students will be required to attend clinical rotations. Each student must work in the emergency department and/or at various assigned EMS precincts for each section of the program. So what that's telling you is that you may work in an emergency department, but you will be working on an ambulance. That is a requirement. You may do all your rotations on an ambulance, or you may do a combination. Clinical rotations will be assigned by the instructor and/or clinical coordinator and may be adjusted as necessary. Now, I will tell you that they work with you with your schedule. The sooner that you get your stuff done and your paperwork completed to attend clinical, the better chances are you will get the time spots that you want. If there is some reason a clinical rotation cannot be completed, the hours missed must be made up hour for hour. For a full rotation to be considered a full rotation, at least 8 hours of each rotation is to be completed, but the missed hours must be made up. Missed clinical rotations are subject to a $75 fee. If you miss a clinical rotation, there is a $75 fee associated with that. Whenever you are taking these clinical spots, all right, you're taking it from somebody else, and when you are not there, it is costing somebody time and money to make arrangements for that. Also, too, if you have to do 24 hours, so don't construe this as meaning, oh, I can do 8 and 8 and I get credit for all 12. No, you only get credit for the hours that you were there. The thing is, for you to get that 8 hours of credit, you have to at least have been there for the 8 hours. If you're there for 4 hours and you leave, then you get credit for none of the hours. Additionally, there are specific tasks that must be completed at each level. Incomplete clinical hours and tasks will result in course failure and ineligibility for the National Registry exam. You must complete the clinical requirements. It is required for you to complete the program. Now here I have in red and bold and underlined, okay? Missing 2 clinical rotations due to an absence will result in a student being expelled from a clinical site, and the student will not be allowed to attend clinical at that location for the remainder of the course. These are clinical site requirements, okay? Not ours. So if you call out and you are absent from a specific site 2 times in a row, they will not allow you to come back. So make sure you stay in compliance with that. Students will be under the supervision at the clinical site. The instructor will assign students to clinical sites. The instructor or the clinical coordinator. Absolutely no alcohol or drugs will be ingested 24 hours prior to or during clinical assignment. Now, what we're saying there, I'm not saying Tylenol or Sudafed or something like that. I'm saying you will not do any illegal drugs or any alcohol 24 hours. You shouldn't be doing it anyway. But unfortunately, we have to put that in here. Any improper conduct, unsafe acts at the clinical site, or violation of the alcohol and drug provision will result in automatic expulsion from the site. If expulsion occurs, students will be required to report to the program director before attending another class or clinical rotation. A clinical site absence will be considered a class absence unless prior notice has been given to the instructor in the clinical facility. Now, to do that, you will do that through the clinical coordinator. All right. Do not contact a clinical facility directly and say, hey, I'm going to be absent. You need to contact the clinical coordinator to do that. Students must report to the assigned clinical site in the assigned uniform. No substitutions for the clinical uniform are allowed. We will go over the requirements of that clinical uniform during your clinical orientation. More specific clinical dress code issues will be addressed in the respective clinical contract. Tattoos may be required to be covered at all times. Some of our clinical sites do not allow tattoos at all, and you have to cover them. Some allow them. That's their prerogative. That's not ours. Additionally, piercings must be removed from all visible areas of the body for clinical rotations as well. While attending clinical rotations, students are required to participate in all work activities as if they are an EMT or an AMT. For example, if asked to wash an ambulance or clean a bathroom, then the student will be expected to complete the required task. The student is attending clinical rotations to learn how to perform as an EMT and an advanced EMT in the field. These tasks are as much part of the student's education as any other task related to patient care. As an EMT, we have to clean the station. We have to clean the bathrooms. We have to wash dishes. Sometimes we have to cook dinner. We have to clean the ambulance. We have to wash the ambulance. We have to stock the ambulance. We have to stock the stock room. We have to do things. So if while you're there as a student, you're expected to do the same things that the employees are expected to do. There's no difference. Students are required to be in the proper uniform with the proper equipment as assigned by the clinical coordinator and lead instructor. Failure to be in uniform or failure to have the required equipment can be a reason for expulsion from the clinical site. Sleeping while at the clinical site is not acceptable. If caught sleeping, students will be asked to leave and the rotation will have to be made up on another day, and you get a $75 fee for that as well. To complete the clinical requirements, students will be expected to attend a minimum of 24 hours of clinical rotations and at least 10 patient assessments. 5 patient assessments must be conducted in the pre-hospital setting while riding on an ambulance. Additional requirements will be found in the clinical handbook. Each student will be required to read the entire clinical handbook before attending clinical rotations. Additionally, while attending clinical rotations, students will be required to have with them ample copies of their clinical paperwork to document a minimum of 15 patient assessments. Even though only 10 are required, you need to bring enough to do 15 each time. Now, that doesn't mean that, hey, I did 5 on my first rotation, so I'm only taking stuff for 10. You need to take 15 on your first rotation and 15 on your second one, so you have plenty. The more you document, the better it is, especially if the state comes and pulls your file for review. Professionalism. Georgia Institute of EMS stresses professionalism throughout the entire program of study. The school and its instructors expect students to conduct themselves in a professional manner at all times. This includes any time a student is on campus, before or after class, anytime the student is wearing the Georgia Institute of EMS uniform, while in class, during lab exercises, and especially at clinical sites. So what I'm saying is, if you are wearing our school uniform and on the way home you decide to go by the bar and get drunk, that's not acceptable, and that could lead to you being expelled from the school. Okay? In addition to being respectful to instructors and staff, students will be required to respect fellow students. Acts of disrespect or harassment will not be tolerated. This includes on campus, off campus, or even on the phone. Any behavior, such as unwanted verbal or physical advances by another person, may be considered sexual harassment and will not be tolerated. If any of the behaviors listed above are encountered, please notify an instructor immediately. Any act of disrespect in the classroom, lab, or clinical site must be immediately brought to the attention of the instructor. No profanity will be tolerated during classroom activity, lab exercises, or on clinical rotations. Cheating. Any act or violation of test-taking procedures during an EMT program will be grounds for immediate dismissal from the program without a refund. So if you're caught cheating, you could be asked to leave the program. Practical exams are performed in groups with the team leader receiving the grade. Unless otherwise instructed, any discussion of scenarios among groups will be considered cheating. Easy way to avoid that, don't cheat. Dress. Attire should be neat, clean, and appropriate at all times. The primary goal of Georgia Institute of EMS is to provide a safe learning environment where all students are able to achieve their highest potential. The personal appearance of every student is an important component of establishing a safe environment for optimal learning and respect for one another. Students are expected to adhere to standards of dress and appearance that are compatible with an effective learning environment. In support of these goals and expectations, the school establishes the following dress code for students. Students are prohibited from wearing clothing, jewelry, book bags, or other articles of personal appearance which depict profanity, vulgarity, obscenity, or violence, promote the use or abuse of tobacco, drugs, or alcohol, may create a threat to the health or safety of the student or others, are associated with intimidation, violence, or violent groups about which students have been notified, may create a significant risk of disruption to the educational process, the operations of the Institute. So pretty much what we're saying here is we do not want anything that you're wearing that's going to disrupt the educational process or anything like that, okay? The following specific items are also not permitted. Clothing worn in such a manner as to reveal underwear, bare feet, bedroom slippers, see-through mesh garments, clothing that is excessively baggy or tight, sunglasses worn inside the school building, and any other article of appearance that is physically revealing or provocative. If a student's dress or appearance violates this dress code, the program director or the program director's designee may require the student to change his or her dress or appearance. The program director and or his designee may make reasonable accommodations to the policy based upon the student's religious beliefs or medical conditions. This policy shall apply to all students at the Georgia Institute of EMS during the regular school day, on field trips, or when the students represent the school. Nails should be short and devoid of loud nail polish or raised decorations. Acrylic nails must be removed before attending clinicals. If you notice, that is important. That is a requirement of the clinical sites. Participation in clinical rotations will not be allowed until acrylic nails are removed and may affect your total lab grade. No perfume or cologne is allowed while in class or on clinical rotations, and offensive tattoos are to be covered at all times. The lead instructor in conjunction with the program director will define offensive. During clinical rotations, tattoos must be covered at all times. In addition, all visible piercings must be removed. Now, I will say that it is in here. You might as well go ahead and assume that you're going to have to cover them, but there are some clinical sites that do allow it. Parking. Students will park in the assigned areas and, if applicable, with the appropriate parking permit displayed as instructed. Some clinical sites require you to have a permit, and if that's the case, they will provide it for you, and you will need to just put it in your dash or on your rearview mirror. Students must adhere to local parking laws. Georgia Institute of EMS is not responsible for any loss, damage, or parking/traffic fines related to vehicles or personal property. Students are not permitted to park across the street from the front of the school. One of the videos that you watched was over parking, and please pay attention to where you are supposed to park or where you can park. We are not responsible for any damage or any tickets or fines that you may incur for parking outside of where you're supposed to. Materials. Students will bring writing materials, textbook, workbook, if a workbook. Right now we're not utilizing a workbook, but if you are assigned a workbook, you will need to bring it. Your lab manual, a BP cuff and stethoscope, and a notebook for taking notes to class each day. Not bringing these items will result in a reduction of your grade for your lab grade. Equipment and supplies. All students are required to set up practical testing stations and lab sessions. All students will have the opportunity to become familiar with the location of all equipment and supplies. At the end of each class, all equipment and supplies must be returned to their proper place and will be checked by an instructor at the end of each session before the students will be dismissed. And this isn't just you, the instructors there helping you as well. And this takes about 5 minutes for everybody to do. Classroom. Eating, drinking, and spitting are prohibited in the classroom unless authorized by the instructor and only during breaks. Breaks will be given and break areas must be used for refreshments. Georgia Institute of EMS is a smoke and tobacco-free institution. Therefore, smoking and the use of tobacco products is not permitted in class or labs, inside or outside. E-cigarettes or vapor cigarettes are not allowed and are considered tobacco products. Phones or other electronic devices will not be visible during any exam or quiz. Phones will not be used during lab time. Posting to social media and testing are not permitted during labs. Additionally, earbuds will not be used during any of the instructional time. Now, there are some times when we will use earbuds to listen to things like, heartbeats or breath sounds or something. If the instructor's leading you, that's fine. But you can't be sitting in lab listening to music and stuff while the instructor's trying to teach you. Visitors. No visitors will be allowed in class or at training exercises without prior approval of the school and the instructor. If you're needing to bring a visitor for some reason, and sometimes this has happened where like a husband has had to come with the wife, or a wife has had to come with the husband, just let us know so that we can make arrangements and stuff. Hepatitis vaccinations. Each student will be given information so an informed decision can be made regarding if he or she wishes to receive the hepatitis B vaccine or not. Each student is responsible for obtaining the hepatitis B vaccination or signing a declaration statement before clinical or student-to-student contact begins. It must be noted that at any time the clinical site may request that all students have at their facility have completed or at least started the vaccination series. What that means is that a clinical site can say everybody here must either have the hepatitis vaccine or have started the series. The hepatitis vaccine is given in a series of 3 shots, so it takes a little time. Failure to begin or complete the Hep B vaccination may inhibit the student from completing the course. The student may decline the hepatitis B vaccination, but the clinical site has a right to refuse to accept any student who has not been vaccinated. The student will incur the cost of the vaccination. We do not provide the vaccination, but the clinical sites may require it. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that a lot of employers require it. Tuberculosis testing. Prior to clinical rotations, students are required to provide a record of negative tuberculin skin testing unless a previous positive reaction can be documented. If a student exhibits a first-time positive reaction to the skin test, he or she must be cleared by a physician prior to further contact with fellow students or patients. Clearance must be documented in writing. Students with a documented history of a positive skin test or adequate treatment of latent infection or active disease are to be exempt from further testing unless signs and symptoms of TB disease develop. Additionally, students who have been past positive TB skin test or adequate treatment of latent infection must provide physician documentation indicating the student is not infectious. Initial and follow-up TB skin tests should be administered and interpreted according to current CDC guidelines. Students are responsible for the cost of their skin test. Students may be required to obtain a new TB test at any time as required by the school or the clinical site. So before you do clinical, you'll have to be tested for tuberculosis. If you come up positive, you'll need to go to your physician and get a certification that you are not infectious. If you have had a past positive before, you'll need a letter from your physician saying that you are not actively infected with tuberculosis. Your immunization record. Students are responsible for providing a record of immunization to include MMR and rubella. You also need possibility of hepatitis and varicella, which is chickenpox. Okay. Chickenpox history is also to be provided. If proof of the disease cannot be provided, vaccination will be required. If immunization records cannot be provided, vaccination will be required following current vaccination guidelines as established by the CDC and the Department of Public Health. Please note that required immunizations are subject to change. Requirements are set by each individual clinical site, and each site has the ability to refuse students from attending clinical at their site, who are not in compliance with the site's established immunization guidelines. Immunization requirements are not set by Georgia Institute of EMS and are subject to change at any time. Many clinical sites require the flu vaccine during flu season. Often these sites will refuse to allow students to attend clinical rotations that refuse the vaccine. Students are responsible for the cost of vaccinations if needed. Physical exam. Prior to beginning of clinical, students may be required to provide a physical exam on the form provided by the school stating that they are fit to perform the manual skills required of EMTs. It is at the discretion of the clinical sites. Students are responsible for the cost of the physical exam if needed. Currently, none of our clinical sites require a physical exam. However, if one popped up and required it, and if you wanted to go there, then you would have to provide that physical exam. Job placement. Georgia Institute of EMS is not responsible for job placement. However, any employment information known will be provided to the students. We've also actually started a website where we post job openings, and we are gone into partnership with local EMS services so that we can keep that site up to date so that you know when and where you can apply for jobs. And we also try to bring employers in to talk to you about job opportunities and job openings on a regular basis. Critical competencies. Practical exams and tests are essential skills that have been identified by Georgia Institute of EMS. Skills identified as critical competencies outlined below must be presented or passed with a minimum score of 85%. Students will be allowed 3 attempts to complete each critical competency with a score of 85 or above. If the student is unsuccessful completing the practical skill exam, the student will be withdrawn from the course and issued a grade of an F. We've never had this. I've been teaching for a long time, and I've never had a student fail out due to skills. So, for example, if you fail a skill, we are going to remediate you until you know what you're doing before you attempt that test again. Okay, so just know that going into that. However, we have to have a policy in place for someone who refuses to do the remediation. And if you refuse to do the remediation and you can't pass it, well, then that's on you. But we're going to provide the remediation for you. It will be open for you to come to, and it's our goal to get you through this, okay? So practical exams may be photographed or videotaped by Georgia Institute of EMS. Now, what I'm talking about here is our practical exams. When the National Registry comes, recording is not allowed at the National Registry. That is their policy. That's their deal. Practical exams will be graded as followed. 2 more attempts of a failed skill will be allowed to achieve a mastery of 85%, but the first grade earned will be recorded regardless of the performance on the retest. Points will be awarded for each step the student performs. Any critical criteria will result in the following point reduction. The first critical criteria will be 31 points reduced, which means if you hit a critical criteria, you automatically fail. So that takes you to the automatic failure. Subsequent critical criteria deductions will be 5 points each. For example, your overall grade for your first attempt at the patient assessment trauma skill is 95, but you committed errors that resulted in 3 areas of critical criteria. The total point deduction from your grade is 41, resulting in an overall grade of 59 for your first attempt. This will be recorded as your grade. However, you'll get 2 more attempts to pass it. Here listed are the critical competencies that we've identified. You have patient assessment, trauma and medical, vital signs, basic airway management, long backboard, KD, wounds, bleeding, shock, cardiac arrest, splinting, and healthcare provider basic life support. Now, CPR is a critical competency that must be taken within the boundaries of Georgia Institute of EMS's program, and the student must successfully complete both the written and practical portions of CPR to earn certification of completion as well as continue in the EMS program. No outside CPR cards will be accepted. Now, we'll have people who come to us and say, well, I'm a CPR instructor. Do I have to do that? Yes, you do. It is a state requirement and it's a school requirement, and we have to make sure that you meet those competencies. Drug screens and background checks. Drug screens and background checks are required for all students prior to participation in clinical rotations. Students will be given specific instructions for obtaining these. Drug screens and background checks must be conducted through a vendor approved by Georgia Institute of EMS. Clinical sites have the right to refuse a student based on results of the background check and drug screen. To successfully complete the program, students must be able to complete all the requirements as set forth by the State Office of EMS. The student will be responsible for the cost of the drug screens and the background checks. Student ID cards. Students will display their student ID cards with their picture clearly visible at all times while at clinical rotations if the site requires it. Not all sites require it. All right, so if you're going to a site that requires it, you will have to present it. Lost or stolen ID cards must be reported immediately and arrangements made to obtain a replacement. Methods of instruction. Presentation of the course will be accomplished through using a hybrid approach utilizing online and offline activities. Instruction will be conducted online via Moodle LMS at georgiaemt.com. In addition, instruction will be presented in the traditional classroom setting through lectures, discussion, audiovisual materials, class and laboratory projects, daily assignments, written projects, written reports, prepared speeches, library assignments, field trips, guest speakers, tests, and quizzes presented both in class and online. Specific software and hardware requirements are the responsibility of the students. No, I'm not required to buy you a computer or buy you Windows or whatever. I've actually had a student who started the program and was not making any progress and wasn't logging in, and they told us, oh, well, I was waiting on you to buy me a computer. I'm like, no, we don't buy computers. Email and electronic communication. All students attending Georgia Institute of EMS must utilize an email account. The use of an email account is a requirement. Email must be checked several times during the week. Students will be responsible for all information distributed via email. Students are expected to respond to emails sent to them by Georgia Institute of EMS within 24 hours during the weekday. Not responding to emails could potentially cause a student to miss vital information. And what we did here is the same requirement that I have for the instructors to respond to you, you have the same requirement to respond back. It's equal. So if we are sending you an email asking you something, for an example, let's say your payment did not go through, and you're behind on your payments, and you need to respond back to us about that. Let's say you missed an assignment or there's something, then you need to respond back. If the instructor sends you an email or our staff sends you an email, then you need to respond back, just like we need to respond back to you. We're a tobacco-free environment. As the dangers of exposure to secondhand smoke have become more apparent, and the realization that creating a tobacco-free environment is important to the health of the Institute's community, the school has established a policy that creates a tobacco-free environment. The school has an obligation to provide a healthy work and learning environment, and Georgia Institute of EMS therefore establishes the following tobacco-free policy for all facilities. Georgia Institute of EMS is a tobacco-free institution. Smoking or the use of any type of tobacco product, regardless of its delivery, is only permitted within the designated smoking areas or in vehicles parked or driven on designated college parking areas and roads. Persons using tobacco in private vehicles must dispose of the tobacco prior to exiting the vehicle and entering campus grounds. In all other areas, Georgia Institute of EMS is designated a tobacco-free campus, both indoors and outdoors on college property. Violation of the policy may result in sanctions ranging from verbal reminders to dismissal from campus. This policy permits to students, faculty, staff, administrators, visitors, general public, or anyone attending anything on our campus. This policy shall apply to Georgia Institute of EMS facilities owned or leased, regardless of the location, now in existence, or come into existence after enactment of this policy. Specifically, tobacco use is prohibited in on-campus buildings, including classrooms, lecture halls, laboratories, office, work areas, study areas, reception areas, meeting rooms, lobbies, hallways, stairwells, elevators, eating areas, lounges, restrooms. Furthermore, smoking is prohibited in all partially enclosed areas such as covered walkways, breezeways, walkways between sections of buildings, areas immediate adjacent to building, entrances, exterior stairways, landings, patios, grassy and green space areas. Well, that's saying you can't smoke in front of the door where people have to walk through it. Tobacco use is prohibited in all school vehicles. Organizers and attendees at public events such as conferences, meetings, public lectures, social events, and cultural events using Georgia Institute of EMS's facilities will be required to abide by the school's tobacco-free policy. Organizers of such events are responsible for communicating this policy to attendees and for enforcing this policy. Campus organizations are prohibited from accepting money or gifts from tobacco companies, and tobacco advertisements are prohibited on all college publications. Course end date. Now, on your contract, after this dash, there will be a date there, which will represent the course end date. Also, too, right here where these X's are, will be a date, and a date will be here, which will represent your course end date. So for this presentation, I don't have a course end date, but just, know that your course end date will be there on the document that you actually sign. And it will read, this course is projected to end on your course end date. This is the actual end date of the course. All course material, online and in class, must be completed. Additionally, all lab and all clinical rotation requirements must be completed by this date. We get students all the time that think, oh, I thought I could do my clinicals anytime. No, you must be completed with your clinicals by the course end date. Extensions will not be automatically granted. Any extension must be approved through the Georgia Department of Public Health, EMS, and Trauma Division. Traditionally, extensions are only granted for issues beyond the student's control. Now look, I have highlighted, bolded, and made this red so that you see and you understand this, okay? There is a $200 course extension application fee. Applying for an extension is not an automatic, and the final decision is up to the Georgia Department of Public Health, EMS, and Trauma Division. If an extension is granted, there will be a fee of $150 per week as well. So just to apply, you have to pay $200. And then you have to pay $150 a week after that for each week of the extension. Now, there is a way to avoid this. Complete everything on time. Okay? If you are having difficulty completing things on time, notify us early so that we can see if there's things we can do to help you. Not finishing all course requirements by your course end date will result in you receiving an F for the course. No refunds will be issued. You don't get a refund because you failed the course. Course extensions and transfers. I understand that I may not be granted any course extensions and or transfers. Furthermore, I understand that if I do not successfully complete this attempt, and if I wish to continue with Georgia Institute of EMS, I will receive no refunds and or credits towards any future classes. That is, like I said, you get through the program. We get students, we've had them go through the program and they fail and then they demand a refund. And that's not the way it works. This is not a pay your fee, get a B institution. You have to earn it. We are dealing with the public safety here, and we are not going to allow you to go out there and work on a patient and you don't know what you're doing. You don't want that either, okay? Financing/payment for course. I understand that I've entered into an agreement to pay Public Safety Leadership and Education Consultants, DBA Georgia Institute of EMS, otherwise known as GAIEMS, a fee for providing products and or services related to initial education/training in the emergency medical technician curriculum. Furthermore, understand that I am responsible for paying for the course as agreed upon. Failure to pay for the course could result in suspension in the program. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you see this is our technical corporation name and our payments through your credit card company may come back as Public Safety Leadership and Education Consultants. Do not dispute those, okay? Don't say, I don't know who that is. That is us. That's Georgia Institute of EMS. Additionally, I understand that I am responsible for the entire debt as outlined in the promissory note and or purchase agreement, even if I do not complete or pass the course. That means we are not a pay your fee, get a B institution. We will do everything in our power to help you get that B. We will remediate you. We will reset tests. We will do tutoring. We will provide whatever we can to help you do it, but you have to do it and you have to prove your competency. Furthermore, I understand that Georgia Institute of EMS has the following financial fees. Return check fee, $50. Late payment fee, $50. Credit card reversal fee, $50. Okay, so the way to avoid those is don't do it, and you'll be fine. In the event of a return check or credit card reversal, Georgia Institute of EMS reserves the right to only accept cash, which means if you bounce a check on us, well, then we're going to want you to pay us in cash. If you turn around and you do a credit card reversal on us, then you're going to need to come and you need to pay us in cash at that point. Please note that your credit card statement may list the school as Public Safety Leadership and Education Consultants, LLC. That is us. So don't reverse that. Collections. Understand that non-payment of tuition could result in your account being turned over for collections. Any and all costs associated with the legal collection of this debt will be the responsibility of the student. This includes attorney fees, labor fees, court cost, or any administrative fees related to collection of any unpaid debt associated with your financial agreement promissory note. All right, and then we're finally to the last part. I told you this would be the longest one. I have read and understand the above contract. After reading each item, I have placed my initials by each, and I will agree to abide by this contract, syllabi, and policies of the course. Understand failure to abide by the provisions of this contract and the syllabi will jeopardize my continued participation in the course. I further understand that this document neither replaces nor supersedes the syllabi, but is used in conjunction with the program syllabi, as well as state and national guidelines and regulations. And what you'll do is you will sign this, and we'll be sending it to you. You'll either sign it in class or you'll sign it electronically, either one. Usually our administrative staff will get that to you, and you will have to have this contract signed and back to us prior to starting the program. I know it's a lot, and that's why I read it to you line by line. You'll have time to read it yourself. Remember, there could be some changes made in it. If there are in yours, it should be highlighted so that you understand it. And it is important for you to read it and understand it. And if you do not understand it, please make sure you get with us so that you can get an explanation as to what you need so that you understand every bit of it. Okay? So that's it for this section. As always, you can email us questions if you'd like to at info@gaiems.com. Additionally, you can speak to us at our orientation night, our in-person orientation as well. If you want to bring anything up about that, we'll be more than glad to help you with it. Thank you once again. And once again, this is Tom Camplain signing off for Georgia Institute of EMS.
Whew, that was a long one. I bet you're glad that's over. I know I am. That was a lot of reading. I just wanted to take one quick moment just to reemphasize that the contract that you sign and turn in is the official contract that will govern what goes on with your course. So if there were any subtle changes between your contract and what was presented in the presentation that you just watched, please know that the contract that you sign is the official contract. If you have any questions or concerns, please make sure you bring them forward to either myself or one of the staff members here at Georgia Institute of EMS, and we'll be more than happy to help you with any clarification or anything that you might need. Once again, thank you for lasting through this, and we look forward to seeing you in class here soon. Thank you.